Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Mark Kleiman. He's a drug policy expert at the Marron Institute at New York University. We also have Datta. She's the country director of Republicans Overseas in Singapore. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. This is a fascinating topic. Mark, let me start with you. Trump seemingly wants to take an almost Duterte-esque turn in terms of his drug policy. Is it the right move?
Oh, it's certainly not the right move, and I doubt that it's a serious intention. Some of your viewers will be able to sympathize with the country in the grip of a lunatic authoritarian demagogue. I'm only hoping that U.S. political system, the remainder of the political system, and civil society are strong enough to resist. But this appears to be completely unserious, and in fact, Trump has backed off. He's now saying, well, we're going to impose the death penalty where it's called for by current law. That law has been in place for 25 years and has never been implemented.
Okay, so it's not serious,
so
Tina.
This is
okay, so this is all theater, according to Mark, basically. Tina, what do you think?
Well, typical of a New York Democrat, which I'm assuming that you are, the first thing that you're doing is assaulting the President of the United States. And one of the things that he promised when he was elected was he was going to enforce the laws as they are on the books, as he feels that many administrations prior to his election had not been actually enforcing the laws as they sit on the books. As you know, laws are enacted in the United States, they're enforced and implemented by the Congress, and those laws are there for a reason. And we've been quite liberal in the way we've been employing the enforcement of our laws across the board over the last 20 years. And President Trump was elected with the promise to enforce the laws as they are. And so while I can understand your position in New York, I don't think that's wishful thinking at this point. That's not just President Trump as the Republican administration. We have 39 governors, we have state houses, we have legislatures. So what I want the people to know is it's not just a Republican president or a Senate or a House. We actually have governorships in states where people took over and back the liberal policies that have been put into place across the United States.
Okay, so Mark, essentially, Trump just wants to enforce current laws and maybe add some teeth to it because there's a massive opioid epidemic and he wants to take it seriously. That's essentially the perspective from the right. Why do you think there's a problem there?
It's worth pointing out that the governors have a completely different view on the opioid crisis. They understand perfectly well that we've been vigorously enforcing the drug laws for the last 40 years. The United States now has 500,000 people behind bars for drug dealing. So the notion that we've somehow been soft on drug dealers is absurd. And in increasing our prison population, right, we've gone from 15,000 drug dealers behind bars in 1980 to 500,000 dealers behind bars today. The prices of all the major drugs, including heroin, have gone down. So the attempt to control the drug market with vigorous enforcement has been tried and has failed. And the governors have recognized that and are pushing toward an approach to the opioid problem that approaches it substantially from the health point of view, which is a sound thing to do.
Okay.
And there's some support in Congress for that.
Okay. So let's take that.
The administration is cutting money for health services.
Right. Let's take
and
that
making nonsense noises about executions.
That goes to the heart of it, right? It's the heart of the different philosophies here at play. Tina, instead of punitive measures, rather go to the source and treat it as a health crisis. Put all that money into that. That will reap better results rather than the failing war on drugs. What do you think, Tina?
Well,
I should make it clear that's not my point of view.
Okay, hold on. Mark wants to clarify.
Just
a second, Tina. Mark, tell me why you feel I put words in your mouth.
Because the notion that we can control the opioid problem either with sheer enforcement or with sheer health measures, both of those are false. This is both a supply problem and a demand problem.
Okay.
We need appropriate enforcement. And we need to invent that. I mean, the main problem we have at the moment is fentanyl coming in from China by mail direct to low-level dealers and consumers.
Okay.
And inventing a way to interfere with that import process requires actual careful thought, not maundering about executing drug dealers.
I'm glad you clarified that. So, Tina, we need to invent a new process, blue sky thinking, come up with something different, a holistic approach, rather than Trump's punitive measures. And I hope, Mark, you find that satisfactory. Tina, tell me why you disagree.
Well, it's not that I disagree with what he's saying, but what I will say is that punitive measures are also necessary when it comes to the dealing of drugs. The quantity levels and the enforcement on a punitive level would definitely send a message that dealing in large levels of fentanyl, large levels of processed heroin, large levels of narcotics, and there's punitive punishment for that, that would probably be one level of deterrent for that type of situation to be occurring. I'm not saying it would solve the problem, but that's a step in the right direction. Obviously, I agree with you with regards to the surveying of mail, where the drugs are coming from, when they do come from China, or when they do come through the mail to the United States. One of the other issues is obviously drugs coming across the southern border of the United States. And with the enforcement and the looking to build the wall, not only for illegal immigration, but also for drug supply and enforcement. Those are all policies that President Trump has been discussing. Okay, we can say, oh, please, but there's been seizures right on the border of California and Mexico now in cars where they're finding heroin stuck in the dashboards of cars. So drugs are coming, heroin is coming across the border.
Tina's point is coming across the border from the south. That's why you need a wall. Mark, you're shaking your head in disagreement. You said, oh, please. Why?
No, that's why you need a wall. That's one of the reasons. That is one of the reasons that they're discussing having the border protected.
Okay, Mark?
So the opioid problem has come in three waves. The first wave was diverted pharmaceutical opioids, especially OxyContin. So there was a problem that the drug dealers were Purdue Pharma and a bunch of crooked doctors and pharmacists. Worth noting that none of them went to prison.
I agree with that.
Well, then perhaps you might talk to Rudy Giuliani, who was the mouthpiece for Purdue Pharma, who kept any of them from going to prison when they were killing thousands of people. Turns out the Republican preference for strong punishment doesn't apply to people who make Republican campaign contributions. So we had a prescription drug epidemic that ran for many years. And then as the government started to crack down on that in 2011 with the reformulation of OxyContin, the prescription pharmaceuticals got to be harder to get. But unfortunately, there had been established a market for opioids across the country, and heroin dealers moved in. And so then we got a wave of heroin deaths. So the prescription drug overdose deaths have actually started to fall, and heroin deaths rose. And then coming in behind the heroin problem was the fentanyl problem. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's a whole class of drugs. There are about 400 different fentanyl drugs. They can be manufactured anywhere, but we're getting most of our supply at the moment from China. It's the fentanyl problem that's the rising part of the epidemic now. So even if it were the case, which it's not, that a wall will keep heroin out, 1 million cargo containers cross U.S. borders every month. One of those containers could hold the heroin supply for a year.
Right.
Can you say needle in a haystack?
Tina?
You're absolutely correct. No, okay, what I want to say is you are absolutely correct when it comes to our security and how we check the containers coming into the country and the arbitrary way that those containers are checked. That is a global issue. As was mentioned, I'm in Singapore. Singapore is at one time or another the largest port in the world, depending year to year. And it is a normal policy that you can't scan every single container for whether it's drugs, weapons, or otherwise. And so you're absolutely right that needle in a haystack situation does occur and can occur. I don't have any specific suggestions, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. I don't think there are any specific suggestions that can address that. That has to do with an overall enforcement policy of just our normal trade, shipping, and what have you, about how to process and protect the United States from the import of drugs through the normal container procedures. Right. And there's not been a policy that's been established to address that. So I do agree with you 100% with regards to that.
Mark?
But notice that makes the wall completely irrelevant, since the stuff can come in by container. When Jack Lawn was the head of DEA in the 1980s,
yes, saying
there was a discussion in Congress. Pardon me. There was a discussion in Congress about building a border wall, and Lawn said to the congressman who was proposing it, "Congressman, if we build a 50-foot wall around the country, the drug dealers will build 51-foot ladders." The basic fact about drug markets is that
I know
they
the
adapt
talking point.
to
I
enforcement.
understand okay, I understand the talking point.
These are I'm sorry. These are not talking points.
But
this is what I do my academic research on. And as I made it clear,
no, but I'm saying a 51-foot ladder of a 50-foot wall.
The notion that building a border wall.
Okay, let's not. That you. Would not help. The notion that would not help. You're saying that would not help.
Okay, you both
That's
disagree
what you're trying to say.
And
that having a border wall along our southern border with large protection, that would not help.
You disagree on the wall. Tina feels that the wall would make a small difference. You disagree with that. Mark, I appreciate, because there's also a delay between your feeds, and I appreciate your patience. I just want to, for the sake of our international audience, just kind of give you the big picture here as to how bad the situation is and give a comparison to 1999. In 1999, there were less than 10,000 opioid-related deaths. In 2016, there were more than 42,000. Now, of course, you can scale for population and all of that, but that is a massive increase. You both recognize there's a problem. You both disagree as to how to maybe go about it. But what's fascinating is that this has been allowed to happen, and in the year 2018, we are where we are right now. Mark, let me ask you about the money. Trump has asked Congress to approve $6 billion in new funding to fight this. Given that you disagree with the approach, do you think that money is going to go to waste?
I have no idea what the money's supposed to be spent on. Restoring the cuts to Medicaid and doing the Medicaid expansion nationally, probably the single biggest thing we could do to fight the opioid crisis. Of course, the attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act would have been a catastrophe. $6 billion is a relatively trivial amount of money in a $2.2 trillion healthcare budget. So, and if the answer is we're going to spend $6 billion on a border wall, no impact whatever.
Okay.
On the epidemic.
Okay, Tina, very finally, we're out of time, but very finally, in 20 seconds, that $6 billion, will it make a difference?
I think if the $6 billion is set on policy to be able to address treatment, enforcement, as we've discussed the health side of it, I think it will make a humongous difference. And the $6 billion, just to make this point, is not budgeted towards the construction of the wall. So I don't want that to be left as the last talking point that was stated. $6 billion will go to support the Americans suffering from the opioid crisis from every level, from top to bottom, from law enforcement to health care. And that is my hope. And $6 billion is better than nothing.
Okay, well, there's a massive problem. We hope it gets solved. It's been really great talking to both of you, Mark Kleiman and Tina Datta. I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers.